you were around the animation unit or something. It wasn't too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot of things where I've just, like recently I did a thing with Don Hahn. And we were
I love Don. Yes.
We were at Walt Disney's home over in Silver Lake. And we did kind of like a little tour
around the animation unit or something.
On Walking Way over in Silver Lake.
Oh.
And I did that with Don Hahn not too long ago. So, you know, we do these little fun projects.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, we're down to like 30 seconds. We'll go live. Willie, I'll introduce you. I'll probably freak out when I do it, so just hold your buckle up. Yeah. I say, son.
Yeah, right.
Boy, you bother me.
Well, again, I could just be in my underwear.
Could. Or you could. I could be in my underwear right now for all anybody knows. I wasn't wearing pants last night, so not for that show. All right, here we go.
There's a sign at the door.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chuck Jones Creativeside chat, and we're in virtual ComicCon week this week, and we've had some amazing shows so far with Daniel Killen and Fabio Napoleone last night, and today we're going to blow the roof off the whole thing because we've not only got a legend in Willie Ito that we are going to chit chat with, but apparently all his legendary friends decided to show up to the house and drink some coffee. So I just found out about this 5 minutes before we went live, and I'm still freaking out. So what I wanted to do today is we've got some amazing art that Willie's done and an amazing compilation piece that we're going to debut here today. And I'm going to introduce, really, I've never met Chuck. I never had the privilege of meeting Chuck. I ended up meeting Craig, his grandson, a few years later after his passing. So meeting people that worked with Chuck is kind of a big deal for me. And I'm going to right now introduce the legend himself, Mr. Willie Ito. Mr. Willie Ito, welcome to the Chuck Jones Creativeside chat again.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's good to be back again.
Yeah, so in case you're wondering what's going on in the background, I'm going to tell you. Keep the shot on Willie right now. You don't need to see me. So as we were, logging on and everything, there was someone sitting in that chair with the red pillow that you can see to the left, and I could only see half of that individual. And I was wondering, and I'm like, who is that? And I said, oh, that looks like Floyd Norman. So I said it out loud. I didn't know if it was Floyd Norman. Sure enough, legendary animator Floyd Norman. And I'm like, shut up. And then we've got another legendary animator right behind him who also worked with Chuck on a whole bunch of stuff, Bob Tyler. We're just hanging out. So this is what happens when you're famous and have famous friends and they all want to come over for coffee. So we have animation legends in house today. For our Chuck Jones Creativeside chat for ComicCon week, and I am thrilled to death. Again, still digesting this and loving every minute of it. And what I wanted to get into tonight, animation is a first love. I wanted to do it when I was little. I realize now I have too much ADD for that, and it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have had the patience. So getting to meet people who have produced some of the dearest things to me, even growing up and now, is an absolute thrill. And Willie, Floyd, Bob, all of them, specifically right now, Willie has been a part of all the major films, especially what's considered the best short films of all time, i.e. what's opera doc. So what I wanted to get into with Willie today is going back into that whole idea of like Termite Terrace. Like we think of animation as this kind of sexy thing now, and back then in 30s, 40s, and 50s when they were going up and they were making all these films, it wasn't necessarily the same environment. Termite Terrace, apropos to its name, was the reason why. So Willie, what I wanted to start with you was, and I loved what you had written out, and reminiscing about something is you couldn't see cartoons on TV. If you saw a short film, you were at the theater, and you were a student, and you were going in to watch these short films because you just got a kick about it. What's your recollection? You're reminiscing of when you were a student and going in to watch these films and the impact that had on you.
Well, there was a theater in downtown San Francisco called the Pix Theater, and they would run 20 cartoons back to back. And I think I would spend about 10 hours in the theater because it was all looped. So I could watch these cartoons over and over and over. And I was in seventh heaven. But like I mentioned, without television, we would basically go to the movie theater twice a week, usually Wednesdays, and which would be an evening show because I was in school. And then on weekends, it's a family outing, and we would go to our neighborhood theater, of which I would sit there. And when that target came on the screen, that was it. I would sit up and I would just crunch down on my jujubes, and sure enough, it was like Charles M. Jones, director, or Isidore Freeling, director, and it was always a blue ribbon cartoon. In my mindset, I would say, God, these are all award-winning blue ribbon cartoons. But then I started to realize that was on the title on all of those vintage period Looney Tunes and Merry Melody cartoons. That's right. But they were, my absolute favorite. I always felt that, wow, these Warner Brother cartoons are so lively, colorful, so much fun. And of course, I was a Disney fan too, having seen Snow White for the very first time at age 5. I knew, that's it, I'm going to be a cartoonist. And so anyhow, having started at Disney first, 1954, state of the art studio. And then after Lady and the Tramp was completed, we had to take a little time off before Sleeping Beauty came down the pipe. So I happened to, during that summer, I was visiting from San Francisco. I did make a visit to Warner Brothers Cartoons with my portfolio, and Johnny Burton looked at my portfolio and says, yeah, we like it very much, but we don't train. So he says, once you get trained, then come on by, So fortunately, my little stint at Disney, trained. So the minute I got word, I called Johnny Burton and says, hey, I'm trained. So he says, well, come on in Monday morning. And sure enough, but sitting in my bullpen with me was a fellow named Corny Cole, who also got laid off that afternoon. So I told Corny, hey, I just got hired at Warner Brothers, so give Johnny Burton a call, which he did, and he was hired. And so the two of us started that following Monday morning at Termite Terrace. Now, can you imagine being exposed to the industry at a state-of-the-art studio like Walt Disney? And suddenly I'm in Termite Terrace. The old desk that I was assigned to, I'm sure, all these old black and white Boston cartoons were animated on it. And the place just reeked of stale cigarettes, because back then in the 50s, everybody smoked. But unfortunately, Termite Terrace did not have central air. We had all the windows open, and it was right in Hollywood and right off the Sunset, and the smog in the air was something else. But then we had to leave the windows open for some cooling, and our eyes would be watering because of the smoke in the small, and it was quite an experience. So my first impression of Termite Terrace is, this is Termite Terrace.
So you basically went from the Beverly Hilton to a Motel 6.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
a good
The
comparison.
Motel 6 of animation. So, you know, and you know what's what I think is great too, and I don't actually think we've mentioned this, and I don't think I've asked this of you in the previous interviews. But what I think is super important, and given the fact that look who's sitting around you right now, I think this is especially timely as well. You mentioned, you know, for any young artist, and I say any artist, period, that's, you know, looking to get into, you know, this kind of industry. They love animation. They want to get into animation. You know, maybe they're watching this and they're saying, well, you know, how did you get rejected? How many times did you know, perseverance? Your advice, and given that you were told that, go get training, and you ended up training at the top animation studio, but what would you say, what would that piece of advice you would give to let's say a young aspiring animator, right, that wants to get into the field today, and is like, what, you know, that word of encouragement, that piece of advice that you would pass on to them?
You know, one of the things that was somewhat, you know, made an impression. I was attending Chouinard's Art Institute during that period before I was hired, and of course, one of my instructors was Mark Davis. You know, one of the legendary 9-0 men.
Yeah.
Thornton, who was a former Disney, and he eventually did go back. But during that period, he was a writer-director at UPA. Now, UPA at that time was one of the hottest studios in town. Mr. Magoo and Gerald McBoing, and everybody wanted to work at UPA. There was a guy that was in my class who was actually in the animation business, and I said, "Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to getting into the cartoon business." And he said, "You're gonna hate it." He says, I advise you against it." And I thought, wow, that's rather negative. But there was a guy that was a guy that was just you know, just disenchanted. He wasn't getting anywhere. He was almost like what you might call a career in between or an assistant. And so he had such a negativity. And here I'm a young kid just looking to get into the business. And then once I did, and then on your own with your talent and working with great people like Chuck, I found myself in an industry that was very satisfying. And so I was sort of reflecting on the negativity. And so if you have a negative attitude, don't get into business, or don't try to stay in the business. Get into something else that will make you happy. But hey, who couldn't be any happier than making a living, making funny pictures, you know? And I think all of us here, Bob here, and you know, we all retired from the animation business, totally happy, you know. And so basically, don't be negative. If you like it, stick with it. And any opportunity you have to advance and better your craft, because Chuck always advocated, even though while we were now working at Warner's in his unit, he always used to encourage all of us to take night classes at Chouinard's and learn from the best, like Don Graham and Mark Davis. And so that was a good advice that Chuck gave to all of us.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, I think it's just like a prime athlete, right, trains to keep that level. Same thing with an artist. You've got to, this is one of those things that it's not crunching numbers on a computer. It's not, you know, maybe what we'd call a typical 9-to-5 job. You've got to put the work in.
Yeah.
And it's the only way you're going to get better. So great advice from Chuck, great advice from you. And, you know, and you got to learn from Mark Davis. I mean, good,
Yeah.
sweet Lord, man. You know, I learned from Mark Davis in a book that I bought.
Oh.
It's about as close as I got. So Willie, as we, you know, you get into Termite Terrace, you're in the Motel 6 of animation studios, but you're working on the top films. Like it almost kind of like doesn't really matter where you're working at that point, because the things, the film, the content you were working on was the best.
Oh,
and you know, I want to get into What's Opera Doc and Robin Hood Daffy and, you know, One Froggy Evening and those things, because they're such iconic pictures. You worked on all of them. And, you know, I know your affinity for Ken Harris, you know, working with him and, you know, what Abe Levito and Ben Washam, all those guys in there. But, and you have specific memories of each on what you learned from them and what you admired about them. What was the, and as I get into this, the link for Willie's art is chuckjonescatalog.com. There's Ito -SDCC 2021. But if you go into chuckjonescatalog.com, you will see his link right up there at the top. You can see all of the sketches that Willie has done for us today that are available, that are amazing. And what was the first, you get into Termite Terrace, you're working there, what's the first film that you started on?
Okay, it's you know, when you're training at Disney and working on a feature, and fortunately, you know, working on the very iconic spaghetti kissing scene in Lady and the Tramp, but that was very arduous training. My mentor, he was a perfectionist, and so he wanted us to just make sure that these drawings are perfect. And of course, you know, back in those days, your drawing would be hand traced. So we have to allow for a certain degree of the drawings missing its mark, so to speak. So if your drawing is 98% perfect and the ink and paint girls follow up and make it, well, 85, 90% perfect, you got a good average. So the precision at Disney was such that I thought, while I was under that training ship, I thought, wow, I wonder if I'm in the right business. You know, there was days that I was frustrated, but I was determined, you know, to persevere. So Monday morning, I start at Termite Terrace. And the first scene I'm assigned to work on was a Speedy Gonzalez picture, one of Friz Freeling's pictures. And Speedy was going all over the screen. But I treated each drawing like I did Lady on a close-up at Disney. We were lucky to do one drawing an hour at Disney. So if you
Wow,
maybe 6 or hit the mark at 8, you were doing well. So here I am, day one at Termite Terrace, working on a Sleepy Gonzalez, and I had my chest pumped because I did 13 drawings on my first day at Termite Terrace. Well, I was in for a rude awakening because I found out that the guys should be averaging at least 30 drawings a day at Warner. So I thought, oh my gosh. And the other thing is, when you're working in Chuck's unit, it's not that he demands it, but the people you're working with is so professional and their drawings are so beautifully done. You have to. You can't just schlock it out, you know. Where I would make up my drawing comp per day is if I was on a Coyote Roadrunner scene and I'd had all these dust. you know. And there I could make
You
up.
could bang out 50 of those suckers. Absolutely.
But on the extremes, I took the time to make sure it was, and Ken was a good draftsman, but he was fast, and he would like at some scenes animate straight ahead. And you start from drawing 1, and then he'll rough out drawing 5 and 9, and just work straight ahead. And whereas a lot of the other animators, you would have charts and you would make breakdowns and in between joints and all. So Ken was so good at that fast stuff, and when that coyote started to churn up and go after that road runner, the action pulls, and he would indicate a lot of so-called dry brushing that would show speed, and it was so fun working on Ken stuff because of all the tricks of the trade that he would instill in his animation, But
So when you were kind of had that shock treatment of going from one drawing an hour to you better be doing one drawing every 10 minutes. What was, you've got to make a switch, and you've got to adapt, and you've got to adapt fast. Did you ever find in those moments where you're like, crap, where maybe you had some self-doubt, or you worked some stuff out, or and then if you had those moments where you're like, how in the H am I going to get through this, or pick this up, where that comes in, and what kind of support did you have around you?
Well, again, like I mentioned, you would get some easy scenes that you could go way over quota. And what a lot of us used to do, and I'm sure even the animators did, is bank it. So you would get, and then you would hold it back without reporting it. And then on a day that you're hungover, maybe. Like going to lunch with Chuck.
Because we are going to revisit that martini lunch. I'm just not yet, but we're going to get into that. So did you find that when you felt that acceleration had to take place, and now all of a sudden maybe you need to be a little looser with your stuff, did you find it difficult at first for you to let go of what you had just come out of and be like, oh, like, was there and it was just, okay, fine, did you find that balance? Was it quick, or did it take a little time?
Well, we had certain moods on a particular day, and we would have maybe 5-6 scenes on our desk to work on, and sometimes you flip through all of the scenes to kind of see what's coming, and not necessarily going in order. I would see a scene that was relatively complex, and that on that particular day you kind of felt like, wow, I want to get in there and really make that expression on Pepe Le Pew just perfect, and so I would just concentrate on that, and not necessarily be concerned about drawing count, but you just want to do a perfect drawings. And like, for instance, Abe Levital, his extreme drawings, when you got his scenes, was so beautifully crafted. It was fun to work on and true up some of the rough drawings. Now Ken says, I want you to be conscious of the size, because if he's animating straight ahead, he may start off with the coyote running, and then as he's working straight ahead, suddenly it'll get larger, but it's on the same, it's not going in the distance or coming forward. So he's running, and then I would flip the scene, and maybe the coyote may kind of change in size. So then it's my job to take drawing number 1, which sets the size. Then I have to jump ahead to drawing 13 and 24 and key those and make sure it's consistent in size, then go back and have to do, So there's different animators and you approach their work in a different frame of mind.
Interesting. So we've got a question from someone on YouTube. So if you're watching on our live YouTube stream, you can pop a question in the chat there. They'll feed that to us in here. We'll ask that to Willie. Same thing if you're watching on Zoom, pop it in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll ask that question to Willie. So Bugs360 had asked, what advice do you have for a young artist? Bugs360, if you want to maybe specify maybe a little bit more, but just in general, Willie, do you have advice? I know we talked about young animators kind of getting into it and really wanting to be positive, be a part of it, or find something different. As a young artist, period, do you have any advice?
Well, I think one of the advice, a good advice I feel, because I practice it, I would study the cartoons. I mean, you sit back and you enjoy it, but then when you rewatch it, you study how Bug's action is, or the expression Porky may have. And these things you should make a mental note of. And then once you get professional, you will get somewhat typecast. And so different animators will have a knack for certain things. Like I was saying that Ken Harris, Chuck would love Ken to do a lot of the dancing scenes because Ken did it so well. Someone like Abe Levital or Ben Washam, good expressions and close-ups and all that, and but in the realm of animators within the business, you do have a knack for certain things. Some animators have become such a student of Tex Avery that they do all of that wild take and all that at ease. And I guess some of the current new animators, and they're young animators working for the HBO series, I see all that wild take and all that a la Tex Avery, and they know how to execute that well. So you will end up with a specialty that you like to do and you like to work on. And then the other thing within our business, and Bob Tyler would attest, you could go to a screening and see a cartoon and you'll know what animator animated up to this point, and then the next sequence, boom, oh, that's so-and-so that animated that, and so on and so forth. So it got to a point where I could sit and watch a Looney Tune, and oh, there's Ben Washam's scene. Oh, Abe Levital took over from here, and Ken Harris is there, and Dick Thompson, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's cool that you have, you develop those unique stamps that you have, and then you put those on it, and to be able to, I don't know if I can tell you right now, I would not be able to catch that, but to be able to have that ability because you know them so well, I think it's fascinating. So speaking of, Chuck's unit and getting in there, the first Chuck film that you worked on was,
during that period, I was still in the bullpen as a in-betweener, and I really, now I'm embarrassed because I can't. Here I'm first Freeling as my first encounter, and I think my second one was Bob McKimson's Foghorn Leghorn, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to say maybe Fast and Furious or something,
yes,
Roadrunner, because you know, those are some of the very early Coyote Roadrunners, and I really got excited about it because Chuck, you know, Chuck would say, yeah, we did the Coyote Roadrunner series just to get it out of our blood, that, you know, all the parodies of Boom, Crash, Acme, Dynamite, whatever that may have been in earlier Texas Rio, Bob Clampett cartoons or Frizzlers. This was the way that Chuck could express his cartoon violence.
Well, and you know, when I look, and I didn't know this until later, but I had, when I was in high school, I was a freshman in high school, and I went from like a small library in the middle school to a bigger library.
Yeah.
And I remember going in, I was a huge animation fan. That's what I wanted to do. And I found Chuck Amuck, you know, and it was in there, and I pulled it out because Bugs Bunny was on the cover, and I'm like, Chuck Jones. I'm like, oh, well, Chuck Jones is on the films that I love the most. All right. And then I started reading.
Okay.
And found it fascinating. And what it got into is when, you know, didn't realize until a little bit later, you know, especially when you talk about Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoons, is the timing of everything, man. And I've talked to animators and directors current day
Yes.
that, you know, that have said, you know, Chuck is the legend for timing, and what he could teach you in those moments with one frame here instead of there was the difference between if it made the gag or not, or whatever that moment was. Did you feel, as you're starting to work with Chuck, and let's just say one of my, and I didn't realize too, like gags start like halftime, so the pace of like action gets quicker. Robin Hood Daffy specifically, because yoinks and away, wham, yoinks and away, wham. And it has the best laugh sequence ever in a cartoon with Porky. So
yeah, exactly.
when you're working on a film like Robin Hood Daffy, and we've got some images right now too. So if you're watching on Zoom, and I think YouTube also, there we go, you'll see some of Willie's work. These are all available on chuckjonescatalog.com. For the link that you see there, it's also been posted in the Zoom chat. That scene right there, boom, with the laughing, just, and you worked on this film. Which scenes did you work on, as my voice cracks?
Well, I actually did a lot of the Daffies, you know, with the pole, and, you know, and boom, boom, boom. And then, you know, God, it was so many. But like I mentioned before, the most impressionable was Abe Levital's Porky Tuck Porky, getting laughing.
Yes.
You know, he just started, and then they got more intense, and I would see that on the screen, and I would absolutely crack up. And even when I would flip the scene, because Bob Bransford was Abe's assistant animator at that time, and he would run in my room and say, "Hey, look at this scene that Abe just did. I just cleaned up," he says, you know. And I said, "Wow, that's funny." Yeah. But when you see it on the screen with the soundtrack, I would lose it. Even today, I would absolutely lose it when I see that scene. And so here we were running the pencil test, and this gal Verena would get all the animated scenes and shoot it on her little pencil test, I should say. Yeah. And as the scenes are completed, it will be strung together, and then it will be run in the pencil test. But during the pencil test, we didn't have sound. We were just looking at the animation, and I could see that scene, you know. And it was infectious, even without the sound effects. But when the film was completed, the whole studio would be called into the projection room, and they would screen the latest cartoons completed by all 3 units. And when that scene came on, I had tears pouring out, and I was literally rolling on the floors. And Chuck was very pleased because it was one of his cartoons, But on the contrary, some of Frizz's cartoons, which I haven't seen from the beginning throughout the production, I would see a fresh, brand new being screened for the studio, and I would react the same way, rolling on the floor. But then you had that infamous Chuck Jones eyeball just kind of looking at me like blink, blink.
So you got the side eye from Chuck.
I got the Chuck Jones side eye. Yeah, it was great. Great.
You can't help but laughing as my dogs are going nuts.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, neighbors are having a pool thing, whatever. It's yeah. So of course they've got to greet everybody. So there's a moment in it, and I think as Porky's laughing at Daffy's demise, right, of himself. And then now, and you mentioned earlier, I kind of tied into that whole like animation, like there's a joy in creating these things, and if you have that joy, pursue it. And to me, like that whole sequence right there is, he's got somebody grumpy, and he's just a jovial, individual, and he ends up, instead of he becoming bitter, he pulls Daffy right into the laughing, which, and I every time. Like from that sequence to the next picture that you have, really, you should buy these as a set if you're gonna, and I'm probably gonna buy these as a set. So that right there, it's start to finish, and this is how it ends up, and I absolutely love that. It's got to be a trip. Did you know, even when you were working specifically on that scene and you're flipping back and forth, does it make you chuckle even just to sit there and be like, I'm flipping through this, and you kind of get it?
Yeah, there were certain scenes that you're working on that you do find yourself laughing to yourself, because you could kind of anticipate the gag, and yeah, especially the Coyote Roadrunners, because you know how it's going to end. And
yes.
so while you're working on it, it says, oh, this crazy beast is gonna have some repercussions about his dumb acne traps and all that, and so you are laughing, and then sometimes you remember the particular scene you're working on, and then when you see the finished product on the screen, you really burst out, or sometimes you're kind of a little disappointed. It wasn't quite the payoff that you were anticipating. So, there's moments like that too, it's like nothing's perfect.
Yes. So did you ever, because I think, as artists, you put whatever you put out there at the time, and that's, you feel a certain way about it. And then I think we all look at stuff after the fact, even sometimes long after the fact, you're like, oh man, you wouldn't know that you would do it different because you're looking at it in a different frame of mind. Is there any particular sequence that, that you did there, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should have done this.
Yeah, oftentimes, because sometimes you have to kind of rush through things. And you're always somewhat cognizant of the fact that there's a schedule, your own schedule, 6 weeks for each department, and so you want to maintain that. Of course, when I was working at Warner Brothers, I never gave a second thought about budgets. It's just one of those things where, well, Warner Brothers will, they're going to pay for this cartoon. I'm not making any extra money, putting in extra time, because we work, we just work right straight, no overtime to speak of. You put in your own time if you felt you were falling behind, and you did. And then of course the studio would close for 2 weeks, and so you're away from it all. But unlike when I was working in television like Hanna-Barbera, you're always up against budgets and deadlines. But working at Looney Tunes, it was just maintain your own schedule. It was great.
So I think too, that whole idea of putting in the time after the fact, if you really felt that way about it, you put it in. Is there a scene or something specific that you're like, I'm not leaving until I get this right, and I understand that my time's up here, but I'm going to put a little bit extra in?
Yeah, generally you're dealing with a single character. But then when you get Pepe Le Pew starting to make love, you got two characters.
Mm-hmm.
He's embracing this poor cat, and her legs are going, and Pepe is, doing his Charles Boy shtick and all that. Well, that's a lot of personality and a lot of animation action. And because it's two characters, you spend more time. And then, of course, when we turn in our schedule, we would always say 2 characters in parentheses. Make sure that production, Edward Salzer, if he's looking at your record, it says, hey, what's Willie's count is down? Oh, 2 characters. I'm assuming.
That was the saving grace. Yeah.
But knowing that it's such a personality scene, you spend that extra time on it,
So, and we've got a question again from YouTube, Bugs361. So, is there a favorite cartoon character for you to draw? Do you have a favorite?
Well, you would think that, working at Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny might be your very favorite character. But, he was a fun character, but Bugs was somewhat difficult to draw to make it look a la Chuck Jones. When I worked on Frizz's Bugs, it was slightly, I found it much easier to draw a Frizz's Bugs, But aside from that, I always did get a kick out of the working on the Coyote Roadrunner, whether it was hello Ralph, good morning Sam. That coyote would always crack me up.
So we have a note from your son who says, "Hey Dad, great interview," and that's from Mark.
Oh.
So see, look, kids are watching. Kids are watching.
A little side note, when I admired Mark Davis so much when I was still going to school, and then he directed directed on Cinderella, and I was still in high school at that time, and I read articles about the 9 Old Men and all. Then I start Chenard's, and there is my instructor. I'm meeting Mark Davis. So I thought to myself, wow, I like that name Mark spelled with a C. So I kept thinking, when I have my, if and when I have a son, I will name him Mark, which I did. I named my number 1 son after the famous Mark Davis. So years later, I would meet with Mark and his wife Alice at the Disney Studio, cocktail parties and all that. And so Alice would remind Mark that, Willie named his first son Mark after you. And Mark would say, wow, I'm really honored. What studio does he work at? And I go, well, actually, he's a mechanic servicing fire trucks. Oh, of course, that's a very, very good job for him. But
absolutely,
they just assume that the acorn didn't fall too far from the tree. However, my granddaughter, Kayla, she is going to be an animator in the business, and she's learning all phases of it: computer, hand drawn. She's learning the gamut. So I'm hoping that she'll do well.
Absolutely. Well, you have your family is chiming in because Isabel says, "Hi, Grandpa."
Oh,
There you go. Right. Absolutely. And we've got another question from YouTube. Malik Watson wants to know, do you think traditional animation has a quality that prevents it from being obsolete? And if so, why?
my feeling, and I'm sure Bob Tyler behind me will agree, traditional 2D animation will always be around, will always be popular. There'll always be exponents that will want to do it in that fashion. I think the computer animation as we see it now, I see such a vast improvement. I see a lot of personality that is put into it. And but my feeling is, my gosh, if you're sitting there with a pencil and flipping those paper and making the drawings, that is where the artist's personality is transformed right on the paper.
And I couldn't agree more. I look at 2D animation, which traditional 2D animation is still my favorite. And it's always been my favorite. I love stop motion. I love the stuff Tim Burton did, and, down the line. And there's been some really amazing, takes as far as like mediums to animate in. But traditional animation has still been like that. That to me is it. Like that's the kind of the pinnacle of that. And I would say because, and we see this in your drawings, and especially in what we've seen on what you have available on the catalog, is I'm privileged enough to have some of Chuck's original sketches, and cells are great, backgrounds are great. I love Maurice Noble and the whole design aspect of things, but there's something in these and the energy that you have and the lines that you put in that is not, it's not replicatable from what I've seen in like a CG kind of thing. You just don't get that same feel to it. So I would agree with you. I think I don't ever see that going away, because I think there's always, it's a medium, it's an art medium, just like oil paint, acrylic paint. You still paint, well, animate. You want a CG, you want a traditional, you're still animating. So when you get into a film like, and what's Opera Doc is the one I want to finish on.
Okay.
But in the meantime, that in between, we go from Robin Hood Daffy, we get into One Froggy Evening, the one shot of a dancing frog, singing dancing frog.
Yes.
When are you involved? Like, is when Chuck comes down, and is it him and Mike that are saying, okay, guys, here's the story, and do they pitch it to you right there and then get everybody in, or how does that come about? You're like, we're going to do a dancing frog.
Yeah, really, Chuck and Mike work together, and they go over the stories, and sometimes they'll invite Ted Pierce or Warren Foster to like have a jam session. And of course, they'll be pointing out gags on the storyboard, and they'll be laughing. And Ed Selzer would be coming down the hall, and he would look in and say, "What the hell does all this laughing got to do with making cartoons?" And everyone looks at each other with the blink, blink. I like what's up? One Froggy, it's like a one shot, and of course, the personality of the character is still going to be established by the animators, because the animators do instill a lot of their own personality in it, and of course, Chuck sort of does the blueprint of what the character should be like. But the animators do put in a lot of their own personality. And but I remember when we were briefed on one foggy evening. At the beginning, you know, I wasn't too hot on it, you might say. You know, it was like, well, it's another one shot. I'll have to learn how to draw this frog. Because, you know, at a certain point, you get to know how to draw Daffy Duck in the dark and blindfolded, or Bugs Bunny and all that. So it's a new character. So you have to know it, get to know it, get familiar with it, and then start seeing it in different stages, like rough pencil tests and this and that, and then when you finally see it on the screen and you could sit back and really digest it, I thought, my gosh, it's all beautifully pantomimed with all this beautiful music, singing and dancing. And I thought, I think Chuck has got an award-winning cartoon here. But at the beginning, I didn't think too much of it.
Mm. Well, and you know, it's as you, because this is going to lead into what's Opera Doc, and I would like you to know that Stephen Muller says hello to Willie and Bob.
Oh my goodness!
So hello to the both of you. Do you know Stephen Muller?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. That makes more sense now. So he says hello, and we're, you know, you take a look at a film, especially I love the design. I love, you know, the action in it. Just the whole premise of the film to me is hilarious. And you get into what we're going to unveil tonight also is the What's Opera Doc piece. And I want to get into What's Opera Doc because there's something in an art piece like this. I look at it as like a piece of art, right? And as all children who grew up watching Looney Tunes, that's how we learned classical music, right? Good old Looney Tunes cartoons. And, you know, you've got such an iconic storyline behind this. It's a very stylized film. I mean, Maurice Noble, good night, run the gamut on this sucker, right?
Magnificent.
And yeah, absolutely. And so working on this film, was there, not that you don't swing for the fences every film, because I'm sure you swing for the fences every film, but is there a sense when you're getting to this kind of a piece with this kind of a classical music piece that you're writing the story to, that, oh, this might be a little bit bigger?
Well, actually, I think my first reaction, you know, because it's operatic and the Wagner and being a musical, but I didn't really, well, you might say, get the dialogue that Michael Maltese wrote to this music, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the key. You have to hear the dialogue, or well, basically, you know, what the whole song is. But the concept was kind of foreign to me. You know, it's like, oh, but Chuck being known to do a lot of these off the chart type of cartoons, that I thought, well, you know, I guess I'll just have to wait and see what the end result will be. And again, like one foggy evening, when I did see the final, I thought, oh my gosh, this is, you know, wonderfully conceived, and it just, the storyline flows. But like you mentioned earlier, Maurice Noble's design were just pulled it all together, and it was just magnificent. During the production, I would, you know, walk into Maurice's office and say, hey, you know, what's the latest? And I'm seeing these great designs, and I said, well, what film is that for? And he said, well, it's for What's Opera Doc. I said, oh, So now I'm putting together the music and all this graphics. And then, of course, I'm working on Ken's animation with all that dancing with Elmer and Bugs. And then I'm beginning to realize, oh, this is going to be somewhat of a classic. And, you know.
So you got, and we've got a couple of shout outs that I'll do. And then what I want to do is show this piece.
Okay.
And we have a couple other questions. Like Mike, I'm going to get to your question also. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to unveil the piece, piece. And I wanted to do that now that we're talking about What's Opera Doc, and then we're going to get some questions from the audience. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please pop a question in the chat. They will get it to me. If you're watching on Zoom, please pop that in. Willie, Terry G says hello from Alaska. So there you go. And here's what I wanted to showcase as we get this started. And Scott Ryder, I believe we even have an intro for you. Oh, yes. Yes, we do. Scott Ryder, I'm going to let you run the gamut on this, sir. And when you are ready, we will take that live.
Wow.
We're going to, yes, absolutely. I'm going to clap for that. We're going to hang on this for a moment. Yes. So, Scott, keep this up for a moment, because I want to discuss this piece. It's brand new. The Scooby-Doo piece was a gigantic success with what you did.
Great.
And unveiling this today, and I know you're partial to some of these characters too, on favorites ones like Nasty Canasta and Hassan and Wile E. Coyote and what you put in. It's a phenomenal piece. It's got you got all the greats in it. It had to be a blast coming up and concepting this to do this for the gallery. What do each one of these 9 have something? Is it something specific to you that we're like, this is it? I mean, we've kind of talked about One Froggy Evening. We've got obviously What's Opera Doc as the centerpiece, and then Robin Hood, Daffy, that whole scene with Pepe Le Pew, and obviously the comedy of Wile E. Coyote. What are the significance of some of these other depictions that we have in here?
Yeah, well, one of my real favorite scenes is from Barbacoa's Money, where Nasty Canasta does this while
Yes.
Bugs with his finger, which was animated by Abe Levital. That made such an impression on me because of the voice of Nasty Canasta too, and the classic. And so that had to go down as one of my favorite. And then, of course, with Witch Hazel, I always loved Ben Washam's animation and how he approached the witch. And so, of course, I had to select that. Of course, the Pepe Le Pew, that's not really from a scene from one of Pepe's pictures, but because I worked on the Lady in the Tramp version of that, I do have people requesting. That's why I did the Pepe Le Pew things. So basically, and then of course, needless to say, What's Opera Doc,
And what we have too special for this on the APs, Scott, I think you have the image of this. It'll kind of flash out like we did on the Scooby-Doo piece. In the bottom right corner, if you purchase one of the APs, Willie will either draw the Hassan chop or another scene in there for you. So you've got the other scenes in there, and then he will draw on that. So you will have kind of a mix, if you will, of limited edition AP plus personalization right on the piece itself, which I think is phenomenal. And again, went over huge with Scooby-Doo. I think they're all gone. And I would imagine this isn't going to last too much longer either.
That means I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil again.
Time to get out the eraser and pencil sharpener and start going to town. So it's a hand painted cell in the center. So, which is the #1 favorite Ave with Opera Doc. So just to let you know, the drawings are all around, and then it's the hand painted cell in the middle, which is, yeah, come on now. So I've got a couple of questions in here as we have that hanging. And by the way, you have another friend joining you. Who's your other friend?
Huh? Oh,
You got
who joined us?
I'm Kenny Tompkins.
Oh, hi, Kenny.
How are you?
Good to see you.
It's like, and I'm just gonna put this out there right now because y'all are hanging out on Ito's couch, and
Yeah.
can I buy? I'm out there in like September. I will buy you all coffee, beer, Coke, whatever you want. I don't know what your beverage of choice is.
Sushi.
Right? I'll order food. We can just hang out, and then it's just story time. If you're down for it,
That'll be fun.
I will buy the whole thing. And you guys, we're just hanging out. So I'm putting it out there right now. Floyd Norman, Bob Tyler, and is it Kenny?
Kenny.
All right, and Kenny, yeah, and Willie. I'm putting it out there right now. You'll probably get an email from me. Okay, so
He likes sushi.
so down. We're totally, yes, sushi,
And
whatever you want.
chocolate.
I will tailor the menu for every single person, and I will hit 5 different restaurants if that's what needs to happen. So yeah, Carol will leave the tip because Carol wants to join me also. I've got, and it's good that you are all there because I've got kind of a group question as well. But I wanted to get to a question from Mike Bartelma, who's hopping on with us on Zoom and has been with us through all 3 shows. Thank you, Mike. Is there anything, Willie, that you would like to work on now or would have liked to work on in the past that you're like, man, that I want on that project?
Yeah, well, that's a hard one because you know, there was so many favorites of Chuck's directed cartoons going way back, you know, and now I don't know if I ever told you the story about me getting drafted. I kind of went off thing, but when I was working with Chuck in the 60s, I got drafted. So I was supposed to report that following Monday. Well, during that period, I was working on one of Chuck's for the Army Department called Re-Up. And so we were like right in the middle of it. And there was a lieutenant that would be like an advisor on the film, technical advisor. So time and again, I would see him at the studio. And so Chuck says, on the day that you're supposed to report, which was a Monday, you're going to have to go downtown to the recruiting board for like an interview. And I'm wondering, oh my gosh, I wonder what that's about. Because that Friday before, I had a big send-off party and gifts. And at that time, my wife, Rosemary, you know, she was all, you know. So I report. I walk into the corporal says that, yeah, you could go in and see him. So I walk in, and sitting behind the desk is this lieutenant. And he's just grinning from ear to ear. And I'm thinking, what's going on? He says, you're deferred. Until this film is completed, you're deferred. So I gave a somewhat of a sigh of relief, but I was so looking forward to serving. You know, all my friends were at Camp Fort Ord and having a great time on weekend leaves, and I wanted to be a part of it. But then, of course, too, I was married, and then as I resumed work on the film for maybe 6 more weeks, my first son, Mark, was in the incubator. So I got
Yes.
the deferment, and so unfortunately or fortunately, I never was, So I have to say that a little film called Re-Up was
Yeah,
like,
you re-upped all right. You re-upped real good.
so
Yes,
that
you
was
did.
kind of like my favorite. And if I had to work on something again, that Re-Up would be good.
Well,
I'm sure you've seen, a lot of stills from that big hulky sergeant.
yes.
That's with the big oversized helmet,
Yes.
and so that was kind of good. I think Ralph Phillips was part of the. Some of these things are kind of running together. But
No, I get it.
I have
But
to
you know what? Right now, your kids and your grandkids are like, I can't believe he just told the conception story, and we're like,
Probably.
Why not?
that's it, kids. That's how it happens. So I first of all, Dennis Little had made a comment. Ito's couch is what we've got to call it. So dinner and drinks time, we're just gonna call it Ito's couch, and we're hanging out. Your son, yes, with everything, whatever you want, we're in. Mark, by the way, your son Mark gave a thumbs up, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yes. So again, for everyone watching, we're blessed to have Willie on, and we've been blessed to have him in numerous times, and it's always a pleasure because there's always different stories and different takes and insights, and that historical aspect of animation and just career wise is huge. And we've got all of his stuff right now on chuckjonescatalog.com. There's a whole bunch of things there to purchase. I love your style. And then we obviously have the big reveal piece of the What's Opera Doc. So seeing as you have all the boys hanging out, and when we do Ito's couch, I'll get to know you all. I know Floyd Norman because I stalk him a little bit on Instagram, and he's a legend, and going all the way back to for me, Jungle Book and that kind of stuff. Just and to hear your story, I've heard this, I heard you say your story. I think it's awesome. Bob, I want to know your story because Bob also worked like directly with Chuck, and there's like the big connection on things. And then Kenny, what did you work on? And because I just don't know.
I'm a new guy.
He's the new guy.
I was roommates with Bruce Smith.
Oh, okay.
All right, there you go. So, Willie, as you got this, you had mentioned you'd have the animation, you guys go to parties. Floyd had mentioned earlier that, a lot of animation units went broke. I don't know if it was because of the parties, but, but you start to mingle with guys. And what I've always found fascinating is, I'm looking at all you guys, you're working with different studios, you're working on different characters, different things, maybe you're working on some of the same stuff, but there's not an ego trip among you. It's this cool camaraderie thing, and it's always about, I think what you did is pretty cool, and what are you working on over there? And it's this just it's this very genuine mood and atmosphere among fellow artists, and you guys are legends in what you do. So it's not, there's an air that you could be playing and you're not, and you don't treat it that way. And I find that refreshing because it's so nice to see that. So what was Willie, as because we've got Ito's couch. So the first time, like, what was it? The first time you met Bob? You don't have to go into the whole party thing, and we'll keep it PG. But what was the first time you met Bob? A fellow Chuck, animator, working on films. How did that happen?
Well, with Bob Tyler, I have to ask him, what was our first real meeting, getting to know us?
Hanna-Barbera.
It was at Hanna-Barbera. Okay.
Then we met again at Sanrio.
Okay. Okay. Sanrio was the other. Yeah. And of course, Floyd and I, we went back a little further.
Well, started out at Disney, then went to Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
Then went back to Disney.
and every time we would have a reunion.
Yeah.
Because that Disney, and of all the departments that I started back at Disney, was comic strip.
Yeah.
And there comes Floyd. He's working in comic strip
Doing comics.
along, and then publishing, and then consumer products.
Yeah.
And I says, "Hey, Floyd, are you following me?"
Yeah. You're wrong. You know.
However, unbeknownst to me, and this is the truth, I had no idea how back at Disney, and then his relationship with Pixar and some of the big contemporary Disney features that he was involved in, because it was like, where's Floyd? I don't see him around in our department, and he's off into Disney features doing all kind of great things,
Floyd is everywhere. I'm just saying,
Yes.
Floyd is everywhere.
He
And
is.
I'll call you Mr. Norman if you want. It can be Mr. Norman. I'll get as formal as you want, or informal. I'm still freaking out. So we had, given the fact that all of you guys had worked at Hanna-Barbera, and we have a question that, and I think it's a very good question that came in from YouTube from Malik Watson. And it was, the question is, 64 years since Hanna-Barbera opened, how did it feel to be in an environment that was shaping the structure of television animation? Like, it's you're in a new thing.
Well, like, to me, I was fortunate enough to start at Hanna-Barbera at one of the very early stages. They just had a great success with the Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear show, and then the Flintstones. And when I came over, they were developed, actually in production with the Jetsons, another big hit. But the fact is, I walked into the layout department on Monday morning, and sitting at the desk were Iwo Takamoto, who is my mentor. He hired me at Disney, trained me at Disney, and then we sort of didn't see each other for the following 6 years. And then when I walk into the Hanna-Barbera office or studio Monday morning, and there's Iwo. But sitting beside him is another former Warner Brother legendary guy named Jerry Eisenberg. And so now Jerry Eisenberg today is my oldest animation friend. We go back to, shortly after Termite Terrace, and we moved into the new studio in Burbank, Jerry came aboard from MGM. His father is famous Harvey Eisenberg, and they were all good buddies with Bill and Joe back in New York. So anyway, Jerry came in, and then when I moved on to Bob Clampett, Jerry took over my position as Ken Harris's assistant. So we go way back, and it's good that we still. Oh, see, I'm wearing the 3 tuners.
Yes.
So with Tony Benedict, Jerry Eisenberg, and myself, we were kind of known as the 3 tuners, and
so Jerry's a buddy of mine now.
Yes.
We're buddies.
Yes.
And Jerry, if you're watching, you did send me an email this week. I am going to email you back this weekend. And I love Jerry. He's just a great guy. So can Jerry be included on Ito's couch when we do this whole dinner
of
drinks
course.
thing?
Yeah.
Definitely we'll get Jerry
Yes.
over here.
All right. I'm just telling you. Yes, and whatever he wants to. So I'm out September 1st, and I leave September 13th. I'm in California. We got time, gentlemen. We got time. Just one evening. That's all I'm looking for. I got the food and drinks. Ito's couch. All right. So I love the history of all that you have woven in. I know Jerry speaks very highly of you also, in the interviews that we've had and just chit-chatting, and such a high regard for you as you have for him. So I think that's it's something remarkable, especially for you know, a friendship to go back that far in that same profession. You know, you don't see that all too often. What I wanted to ask as we kind of round this out today, because there I'm sure will be an Ito 4, because this is Ito 3. I'm sure there will be an Ito 4. And gentlemen, y'all invited again, just saying. And this is separate from Ito's couch. Okay, it's separate. Ito's couch is a separate thing. That's just a private event. So, you know, as you, I know that you were heavily involved in, you know, a newer project that was coming to fruition. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about this when you got into, oh, I did not know this. Jerry presented you with the Annie Award for Lifetime Achievement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that, come on now, don't be modest. That's pretty awesome. So when did that happen?
Well, I was notified back in February, and I started to get a little concerned because, you know, gaining a few pounds during the pandemic, I figured, well, I'm not going to be able to fit into my dark suit. I'm going to have to probably rent a tux and go through that whole number. But fortunately, or unfortunately, it was done virtually. So I never had the opportunity to enjoy that phase of it. Cindy, my assistant, she filmed my acceptance speech, and it took me a number of takes to get that taken care of. However, she had to drive all the way to Tarzana, to Jerry's place, so he could make the presentation speech, which he did. Then she comes all the way back here, and 2 days later, my Annie Award arrives. And so we thought, well, wouldn't it be
Just like
there
that.
you go.
So we had
that woman is a saint, by the way. That woman is a saint. Keep going.
Thank you.
And so again, after about 56 takes, he says, keep your acceptance speech down to 2 minutes, you know. And so I'm trying to remember everything of my family and this and that.
2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. You know? And so, of course, I kept blowing my lines and all that, and finally got it right. Then she takes this and drives all the way out to Tarzana and has to now refilm Jerry handing it to me.
Nice.
So we went through a lot, and then realizing that it was going to be virtual, I felt a little relieved in a sense that I could be sitting here in my skivvies, and I just wore a sport jacket and try to look presentable. But
I mean, if you look at it, the frog on your shirt only has a top hat on. Could have got away with that.
Well, I hadn't had a haircut for like you know, so my gray hair was hanging all over, and I kind of looked like this. And my sister-in-law, who hadn't seen me for a while, calls me the next day and says, "Willie, are you okay?" What? Boy, did I look that bad, where she was so overly concerned to say, are you okay? So I thought, oh, well, you know, that's showbiz.
Yes. Well, you know, I mean, you think about it, 64 takes. I'm sure there's a lot of info in there. You didn't go into the, it could have gone wildly askew, and you could have been like, I just want to thank my son who was conceived after I didn't go into the army, and I named him after Mark Davis. I love you. I'm not bringing it back.
You just can't interview me on Zoom. I let it all hang out.
So, there's such a quality to everything that you've put into your work. And, from then to now, I know you've got forgive me, because I don't remember exactly what it was the project in Italy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. When I retired, I'm not the type that could sit on my hands. I just kind of felt like I wanted to do something. And so my friend of mine that I spent in post-war San Francisco, he was also incarcerated during that period. So he came up with a story that he asked me to illustrate. And he was rather persistent. And I says, well, Shig, I'm retired now. I'm going to hang up my pencil and just take it easy. But he kept at it, And so I said, okay, Shig, send me the manuscript, which he did. Then I was reading it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is his experience at the Heart Mountain, camp. And I went to a different camp in the heart of Utah. But as it turns out, all the camps are relatively the same. We were all stuck in the middle of the desert, and the climate was so, inconducive to what we were used to coming. Especially, I came from San Francisco, being that it was a mild and winters were just rainy. Suddenly, first time in my life, I'm experiencing snow and cold and being in the middle of the desert, all this alkali dust that's blowing away, and then being in a barracks, no insulation, it's just tar paper. And so we had to suffer through harsh winters with the potbelly stove that you would burn wood or coal or whatever. And summers, you open up the windows to get cross ventilation, and it was all dust. So I thought, the kids, the Japanese American kids of today, like my kids and my grandkids, they don't really hear much about it in school. It may be somewhat passed over, but not really part of the curriculum in learning. So I thought, this is a good way for me to involve myself in teaching our history, but in a child-friendly manner. It's a bird and a pen and all. So we did that. And then, of course, this was 2005. We couldn't find a publisher that would be, willing to take on maybe a subject that might have been construed as too sensitive. And of course, now today, with the anti-Asian attitudes going on and all that, the book is become somewhat requested. We did sell out completely, and so I'm now doing a revised version, adding a few more new pages. But so Shig and I said, well, let's just self-publish it and self-promote it, and, which we did. So anyhow, Chia, I went such a long ways to talk about it.
It's okay.
But nevertheless, we were in Italy, and our host had a copy of Hello Maggie on the shelf. And I said, oh my gosh, it was so unusual to see my book way over in Florence, Italy. And so we kind of talked about it. And he says, yeah, he collect all of our artwork, Jerry's
Mm-hmm.
stuff, Ewo's, pop singers, anything that ended up on Heritage auction that was done by us, he would buy it. So he pulls out this flat file. It was full of drawings from Hannah. So anyway, the subject of the book came up, and so a few months passed after we were home, just prior to the pandemic, and then we got word that they're going to do it.
Awesome.
So it's currently in production. It's divided between Sheridan College in Toronto, Canada, and Nemo Land and we have this animator, Sandro Cruzo. I don't know. Yeah, and he's my animation director, and he's one of the finest young animators or contemporary animators.
Mm-hmm.
Working on it, and so got a good crew. So,
well, we're very much looking forward to that. And I have 2 questions.
Oh yes, sir.
Meaning, I mean, I have more than 2, but Ito's count.
Yeah.
So we save those. So 2 questions. One is, before I look up, there's a whole, you're hanging out with your legendary friends, and do you guys still, or do you caricature? Do you sit around and you do little doodles on stuff, and like you're hanging out and you're like, you caricature kind of like when you're back in the studio kind of stuff at a meeting? Does stuff like that still happen? Floyd Norman, Bob Tyler. Yes.
Do you do that, Bob?
I do fine art basically now.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting around with your friends, do you doodle?
Not as much as I used to. I used to carry a sketchbook around all the time, but not anymore. That's one of the ways to get started. Make a sketch every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's good practice. Anything.
Yes. And important advice, because Chuck said the same thing, and it was draw everything all the time. Right. Keep going.
I'm happy to say my art is not fine. Funny.
That's all right. It's good. So,
right. It's just funny.
That's okay. We're in for that.
He did some of the greatest Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg parodies or cartoons, and also Hanna-Barbera.
They did a whole book on Michael Eisner.
Yeah, right. But the classic is his Walt Disney.
Is it?
He did, a number of great Walt Disney stories.
So, Ito's couch, you want to, whatever. I just want to see it. I'm not asking to take it. I'm just looking to see it. And then maybe we have a little caricature-a-thon or something. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It could be crazy. So, what I wanted to mention too is that we've unveiled the new edition. Scott Ryder, can you put that back up for us, please? With the What's Opera doc. And we've got this. There's a gift. Again, Willie will, in that bottom right-hand corner, Willie will draw something on this. It's a hand-painted cell in the middle. The sketch is around, and then Willie on the APs will sketch something, either that or something new in that bottom right-hand corner. And there's also a gift with purchase. The Deer Collector letter from Willie and a commemorative dedication card with a little doodle on it. Mm-hmm. So I think Scott Ryder's got that. Yeah, you can pull that up, Scott. There you go. So Willie will do a little doodle on something and dedicate it to you in addition to the letter, which is awesome. Mark Ito asked, do I need to chaperone this Ito's couch? You could. Mark, it's going to be a blast. If you want to be there, man, doors. I'm going to say that Willie would say, yes, you should be there, or you could be there. So thank you again, man. As we wrap this up, I could talk to you for hours and hang out, because you're that cool and interesting of a guy, and the stories that you have, your recollections of things are so crisp, and it's an absolute pleasure. I learn something new every time that we talk, and you brought your buddies. Now, Bob, I love you already. It's a new love. Okay, it's a new love because I just met you. Floyd, loved you for a long time, buddy. You haven't even known it. Willie, I've openly said it. So, you know, now that we have, and Kenny, it's a new love also, man. I'm going to put you right in the group. So a new love for Kenny also, who's like, who's the guy with the beard and the shells that's talking to me right now? I wanted to say thank you so much. What would you like to say to the audience on YouTube right now that's been watching on Zoom? Parting thoughts from the legendary Willie Ito.
Parting thoughts.
Yeah, well, of course, my sentiment is there's so many fans of Looney Tune cartoons out there, you know. When I speak at conventions, you know, I get millennials and I get all different generations, and they'll come up to me and say, "Thanks for your service." And I said, "Well, I was never in the service. I did get deferred, but I wasn't in the service." They said, "No, you made us laugh for all these years." And so that always is very gratifying.
And I will double down on that sentiment, sir, because what you worked on influenced me as a child and continues to influence me as an adult. And I think it's very important for kids of all ages to digest these films, you know, learn from that, just laugh, you know, don't, as Chuck would say, always take your work, but never yourself seriously. And I think that was exemplified in these films, where you guys took your work seriously, but at the end of the day, you made films that were hilarious. They made you laugh. They made you think about something, but it was good. It was good quality fun. And in some parts that's not always there in the age that we live in. So I think it's good for kids of all ages. So Willie, we'll save because I'm sure some people have heard this before. I heard it for the first time at lunch in 2019, or at dinner at the JFG, but we'll get to the martini lunch afterwards, because I want to know, I'll want to know, Bob, if you went to the martini lunches also, because you worked in Chunks Unit. Is that a yes or a no to the, did you do a martini lunch?
Oh yeah, Don Foster.
Yes, martini lunch,
yeah,
break, and after work at 6.
There you go. All right, Floyd, did you ever do a martini lunch?
At Alphonse's in Burbank.
All right.
The old Disney guys.
Old guys, yeah.
The old guys.
The classic guys.
Yeah.
So see, like
the smokehouse.
The smokehouse, yeah.
The smokehouse. So we could do martinis at Ito's couch. I don't know what you want to do. It could be a coffee, whatever you want. You guys pick.
Full bar.
So there you go. All right. Well, as we close it out, again, I want to thank the Chuck Jones folks. I want to thank Robert Patrick. I want to thank Scott Dickens, Scott Ryder, Dawn, and Craig and Linda for allowing us to do these things where we're able to chat with wonderful people, learn a lot of great stuff, and meet some legends. And of course, I want to thank, I'm going to go around it, Willie, I'm going to save you for the crescendo. I want to thank Kenny. Why? Because Kenny's awesome. Bob, the new love, Bob, you're awesome. Floyd Norman, you saw my reaction when it was actually you on that chair, and I was like, what? So yeah, Floyd Norman, who's doing a little product placement for Bose today. I hope you get a check for that. And then of course, Willie, I have such an admiration for you, sir.
Let me introduce, you may have met Cindy Fortino at some of the other past.
Cindy.
Cindy, yes.
Hi.
She's my assistant. She helps with all the Zooming. See, I'm from the 40s and the 50s. I have no idea what all this BS is about. Without her, I'd be talking to the air. So
Cindy is the magician behind the curtain, and dear, you are a blessing, and we give you the praise, dear. Absolutely.
And now she's gonna serve the drinks.
Now she's gonna have a mojito.
There you go. Yeah, she'll serve herself.
And you know what? It's a shame we're ending a little too soon because Leo Sullivan is on his way.
Oh,
he called about 5 minutes ago and said, "I'm on the freeway. I'm on my way."
Well, you know, next time we do this in Ito's couch, we'll have to have Leo out, and then when we do another Creative Side chat with Willie, which will be the whole gang, we'll have to have Leo back for that. So tell him he was missed, and we'll look forward to the next time. And then Willie, You know, I love you, man. And I met you at the JFG when you guys were up there discussing your history on some stuff. You were such an engaging individual. You were so approachable and easy to talk to. And every single time that we've done something in person, something like this, man, you've been an absolute blessing. And so I just count it a high honor that I've had the opportunity to hang out and chit chat with you in just a handful of times that I've been able to. So thank you very much, Willie. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend, everybody. And
that's all, folks.
that's what we're closing with. Good night, everybody.